If you've seen my previous videos on this McIntosh MPM 4000 power output meter, you would know that I originally picked up this VU meter unit to potentially rack mount it and hook it up to my McIntosh MI75 amplifiers. I wasn't even sure if these VU meters, which are meant for car stereo, would even work with a regular home stereo amp. Therefore, my first video was about a test run, trial and error, and trying to figure out if it can work with the ICO HF81, which I chose as a test amplifier at that time. By the end of the video, you can see that I was thankfully able to get this unit to work with the ICO. And then my next video was just trying to see if it'll work with a solid-state Marantz, and of course it does work, proving that this unit can indeed work with any amplifier. But because of its very small size, I've decided to not use this unit in the rack with the MI75s, and rather have this unit as a standalone unit that can be hooked up to any amplifier. So given that this unit has all these wires that need to be better protected and enclosed, I thought of having an enclosure or a case made for this unit. So I found West Hills Wood locally and had him make an enclosure for this unit. I gave him the dimensions that I wanted, and a couple of weeks later, I have this enclosure here made of wood specifically for this VU meter unit. Here's the opening for the unit, and in the back I had asked him to install a removable panel. So he's put a 1/4 inch panel here, which I'm still trying to figure out what to do with. So here's the unit, it looks great. Now let's go ahead and put that unit into the enclosure. There it is. I had given him the exact dimensions, so the fit is snug. It doesn't easily come out unless you pull it or yank it hard. So it's a nice and snug fit. And as you can see, the unit overall just looks great in here. It's a great little enclosure for this unit. And coming to the back, we have this opening here for wires and connections. Let me unscrew that. So as you can see, here's the opening with all the wires that can connect to the amplifier as well as the power. So I kept it open to decide what to do with it. I could keep it as is and just connect the wires and keep them in here. And I've decided to take this unit and this enclosure to a whole nother level by just using these 3 additional parts. I'm going to drill holes and install these 3 parts on the back panel. Here's the power connector that will connect to the 12-volt DC power, which makes connecting the power supply easier. And here's a toggle switch. I figured I don't want this unit to be always on, so it would be best to have a switch to be able to turn this unit on and off as desired. So I got this toggle switch. However, I think I ordered a big size, but that should be fine. And finally, we have the speaker terminals to be able to easily connect this unit to the amplifier. So let's get started with marking and drilling holes and installing these parts. So first I have to measure and mark the available space I have here. Even though this panel is about 8.5 inches long, I only have about 7 inches of space to work with. So let me first mark that. So now that I have marked the space, I'm going to next measure the diameters on the parts for drilling holes. First up, we have the power connector. Let's measure that. It's about 0.42 inches. Next, we have the toggle switch. It's about 0.45, about the same. And lastly, we have the speaker terminals, which we know are not as wide. So these are about 0.14 inch. So based on that, I could mark the drilling holes here. We're going to space out the speaker terminals as well as the power connector as well as the switch here. There we have it. The toggle switch, power connector, 4 speaker terminals. Let's get drilling. There it is. We've got the power switch, power connector. This is a I don't know if I'll keep this for too long. I think I drilled the speaker terminals too close to each other, but it's okay. I don't mind that. And this is a small panel that I can replace and just swap the parts out. I also want to make it a little thicker. This is too thin, but this is good for prototype to see how it will work, and I can upgrade it later. So all the components are in: the speaker terminals, the power receptor here, and the switch. The switch is an overkill. I think I'm supposed to get a smaller switch, but oh well. Thinking I should try to connect them or solder them and see how that works. I don't like how close I drilled the other holes. I made the mistake of measuring the width of this thing here to drill the holes, but I didn't account for how wide the plastic connector are. So I'm gonna redo the holes, a couple of them, just to space them out properly. Yeah, much better. Better spacing, and overall just better in the back as well. So these are ready to go. As far as the connectors are concerned, they're not loose, just the perfect fit. So the next step would be to connect the wires. All right, so here we have it. The unit is in the enclosure, and here's all the wires in the back. If you recall, we have the black and these colored ones for power, and we have these four here to the speaker terminals. So the four to the speaker terminal, and these power ones to power. And just clear up the tangle that's going on in there. There. So now the speakers wires are on the left, and the power wires are on the right. And so this is negative. That would connect to, we can connect it to, I believe the positive is in the center of this one. So the negative would connect there. Of course, I'll have to cut this, strip it, solder it, and the switch will just act as a switch to pass the power. So let's figure this out. I'm going to have to cut all of these wires and then connect them. So I'm going to cut these wires here. I'm going to try to save as much wire as possible by getting these plastic protectors out, because we don't want to run out of wire. So yeah, that was the last of it. I have the plastic covers out. I'm going to cut the wires now. All right, so I've got the speaker ones here, the white, the grays, and I've got the power one here. And now I'm just going to strip them. Okay, so we have all the wires ready to go. That's the ground, that's the positive on the power. So these two to the power, and these four here to the speaker terminals. Let me get the speaker terminals screws on here. So if you recall from the user's manual, the gray and the gray black are for the right speaker. So we will have it on the right here, and the white and the white black are for the left speaker. So we'll put it here. I'm trying to make sure these wires are not tangled any more than they need to, so I'm going to separate them out over here. This is good, this is good, this one is a little tangled. Let me pull it out. Yep, they're good now. So the gray and the gray black. So I'm gonna solder these later, since I have an option to just wind these wires here on these terminals for now for test purposes. There's one wire here that I would have to solder. I don't have an option apart from soldering that. So for now, I'm just going to wind these here just to test them. And then once I know everything is working as expected, I will go ahead and solder these. But for now, I'm just going to connect these and just wind them on these terminals a little bit, just like that, so to have the connection. So the speaker cables, the terminals, as you can see, are connected. Now for the power, I'll need for the switch, I'll need another wire cable. This is the negative, so I could just connect this one this way. So like I was saying, I will, let me go the other way actually, that way we don't short it. Okay, I will solder these later, but for now, get that out of the way that way too a little bit. This one would have to be soldered here, the power. So this one would actually connect to the switch just fine. Let me make sure there's connection. Again, I will solder all of these after I confirm that it's working, and I'll need a small wire to connect these two terminals. So let me grab that. So there it is. I have the small piece of wire that will connect the power connector here from the source to the switch that way. So let me go ahead and put this here. And this was the piece of saying that I will most likely need to solder this because there is no connector here for the power. So we'll just need to solder that. It's probably best to solder everything. So let me get going on that. Okay, apparently I wasn't recording, but I just soldered that right there. That's soldered. The rest of the wires are just connected for now, just wound around the terminals. I just want to give it a quick test to make sure everything is fine here. And then I'll go ahead and finally solder the rest of them. Here we go. That should be good. Let's put the second screw in. A quick test would be to just power it on. Let's see if that works. So let me grab, this is the 12 volt DC. Let me plug it in. It's in. And if I soldered everything right and connected everything right, when I turn the toggle switch on, this should turn on. Let's give it a shot. 1, 2, 3. Yep. That's the toggle switch. Off, on, off. So at least I know that the power switch, the toggle switch, is working. So this looks good. This looks good enough. I'm going to eventually replace this with a thicker wood and solder everything, but this is a good prototype and run. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and connect these to one of my amplifiers and see if the VU meter works after putting it together this way. All right, so I brought out the baby Marantz receiver for a quick test. I've hooked up the VU meter to the receiver. Now let's turn everything on and do a quick test to make sure everything is working as expected. There's the Marantz. Let's turn on the VU meters. Nice. Now let me go ahead and play a song. Okay, music is playing. Let's slowly put the volume up to see if the VU meters are working. And yes, that's great. Looks like everything is working as expected. Let's quickly make sure the channels are also working as expected. right channel, left channel. Good, everything is good. So we can now go ahead and solder all the connections before I hook it up to maybe the Marantz 8B after I'm done with everything. All right, time to solder up. All right, so now that we know everything is working as expected, I'm going to unwind all of these wires and make sure we prepare everything for basically making the connections permanent by soldering them. So I'm going to remove these wires. We now know everything works. And if you recall, the only one solder I had done, well, the camera wasn't recording really, was this one here. And that one is good. We don't need to resolder that, but everything else we'll have to prep and solder. So I'm going to tin these wires. I'm also going to make sure all of these speaker terminal connections are all aligned properly with the holes in the terminals here all lined up. It's one of my pet peeves when I see that, and sometimes those are not lined up on some speakers and other equipment. So I'll do that. Let me just take these out actually. Yeah, pretty much it's ready to be soldered now. And for now, I think I'm good with this strip for now. I'll eventually replace it and then just desolder and resolder again when I eventually get to it. But for now, I just want to make this connections permanent so I could start using it with the amplifiers for now. All right, these are all aligned and tight now. So we'll go ahead and get all the wires here tinned. All right, so I've got all the contacts ready to be soldered onto. I'm going to go ahead and tin the rest of the wires now and solder them. So you can see here what the tinned wire looks like compared to the non-tinned. It's always better to tin the wire before you solder them, so it's a better solder, better joint. All the wires have been tinned. The 4 speaker wires, 2 power wires. But let's go ahead and solder. I think we're ready to go. Okay, the soldering is done. Now that everything is done, I'm just going to put everything back in there again and close this up, and we'll be good to go for now until I decide to change anything up again. All right, it's good to go. Now let's go ahead and connect it to one of the tube amplifiers. All right, so I've decided to hook this up to the Marantz 8B. So I'm going to turn them around and show you the connections. So for the VU meter and the speaker connection, I'm going to use these spade to banana adapters to connect both the VU meters and the speakers to the 8 ohm tap on the 8B. Okay, the adapters are on. I've got 4 connections up on the top here, the red and the black, the red and the black, and on the bottom 4 more, red and black, red and black. So I could hook up speakers to either the top or the bottom and the VU meter on the other side. So I'll go ahead and connect my speaker wires and cables to the bottom. So the speaker connection is complete. And now I'll hook up the VU meter. Okay, so there it is. I've got the VU meter connected here. And then I've got my speaker cables down here. Let me turn this around and hide the wires and we'll be good to go. All right, let's turn the system on. And the VU meter's on. And let's give it a minute for the tubes to warm up. Right, now that we're ready to go, let's put some music on and watch those VU meters bounce. I'm going to put the volume up just a little bit. And let's hit play. So finally, my dream of having some VU meters with some old vintage tube amplifiers is complete. I could have this as a standalone unit and just hook it up to anything I want. I'm thinking of maybe putting it over there and have the DAC and the streamer sit on top of it, or I'll figure something out. But I had a couple of people ask me questions about why am I even pursuing a VU meter? Is it because I like the VU meter? What's the appeal? Because everybody seems to love the VU meters, apart from, yeah, they look cool and it's nice to watch the bouncing needles. What else are they good for? And I was telling them that for me, it's not just about the cool looks. What I like about the VU meters, especially with tube amplifiers, where you have a set of 2 channels, especially in a push-pull amplifier, you have 2 channels and you have 2 tubes per channel, 1 set of tubes for the left or the right. And when you have to match them, test them, a lot of circuits in the amplifiers are channel specific. So if something is going off on one channel, it's sometimes hard to diagnose that. And I find VU meters very helpful for that, where you're able to hook up both the channels and you could watch the needles and see if both the channels are performing the same. Are they performing equal to each other, or is one off than the other? So it gives a quick way to glance at that, especially if you also have monoblocks. And with monoblocks, it's even more complicated because they are truly independent amplifiers. And the set of tubes The voltage reading on each of them could be slightly off, so the gain on one can be slightly higher than the other. So if you have the ability to adjust the gain, like on the MIs, I should be able to do that. So what I do is I've created a track that is exactly the same. I could pick a mono track, but rather than trusting what's been provided, I've taken a track and replicated the left channel on the right channel, so I know that both left and right are exactly the same. Music, gain, dynamic range, everything is the same on both channels. So when I play a song like that on the amplifier, I know that the VU meters should act exactly the same in terms of how far and wide they bounce, how far and wide they go, and the general observation on the needles should be exactly the same for those two channels. So that's how I use the VU meters to test the channel performance on the amplifiers. And the other thing, I don't know how true this is or not, the other thing I've noticed is that I can also tell if a song has a really good dynamic range based on the VU meters and the way how far and wide they bounce, compared to a really compressed song that will not vary in terms of how wide it goes left and right. It will mostly stay in the same place and not vary much in terms of degree of change. I'm able to look at the meters and determine which songs have a high dynamic range. I don't know if it's true or if I'm just reading too much into it, but I've at least found that the songs I really like and really sound good seem to move the meter quite a bit compared to anything that's highly compressed. The meter tends to, it will vibrate and move, but the degree of variation, the arc will be quite less and limited. So yeah, that's what I use the VU meters for. But if I only have it in an enclosure with all the connections in the back where it looks like a regular home stereo VU meter, albeit small, but I guess I've been able to take a car stereo VU meter and convert it into a proper home stereo VU meter. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.